Yo, and welcome back to another episode on Kubernetes. In this video, we're going to be building a Kubernetes cluster and we're going to be deploying it to the cloud in DigitalOcean. And today we're going to be using Cubicorn as an example to do that. So Cubicorn helps users manage their infrastructure for Kubernetes. It allows them to create clusters, destroy clusters, manage their clusters by scaling and creating snapshots, etc. And the other cool thing is it supports multiple cloud vendors like Azure and DigitalOcean, and AWS and Google Compute Engine, for example. It is unofficial, but they do state that it's not production ready, so you must use it on your own risk. But for me, I want to try it out, so I'm going to spin it up in DigitalOcean today and see how easy it was to build a Kubernetes cluster. Cool, so I already have the Kubicorn tool installed. So what I'm going to do is take you through the help wizard. So you're greeted with this beautiful unicorn, and then you get down to some of these available commands. So one command that's really caught my eye is this adopt feature, and I haven't tried it yet, but just by reading about it seems quite interesting. And the interesting thing about it is it says it can adopt a Kubernetes cluster into Kubicorn state store. Now the way that I read that is, the way that I see it is, it can take an existing Kubernetes cluster and actually adopt it and provide a state file for it, which is quite cool to be fair. Then you've got some of your generic commands like apply, create, delete, edit, and image, which image takes a snapshot of the running Kubernetes cluster and assume with that you can actually restore and do loads of other things with it, which is quite cool. So what we're going to do is use Kubicorn to create a cluster. So we say Kubicorn create, and I'm going to say Soundwave because I'm a big Transformers fan, and Soundwave is a transformer. And you have to specify a profile, and DO is short for DigitalOcean. Now there are others as I mentioned earlier, but because I use DigitalOcean, we're going to use DigitalOcean to build a cluster. Cool, so what it's done is generated a state file, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go take a look at this state file just to see what some of the things that we can actually do with this file. Cool, so this is the YAML file, and there's a few things that have already caught my eye. So one thing is that you can specify a different public key, because maybe you don't want to use certain ones, maybe just in case you're using different ones for different clusters, different environments, or even for different bits of infrastructure. Maybe some of them not for Kubernetes. You can specify a user, and you can specify where you want it, so you don't just have to put DO as the profile. You can actually go and say the cloud could be AWS or Azure, I assume anyway. You can set a region, so for example this is SFO, so I guess that's San Francisco, and I could set this to London, so LON1 for example, and that would be in the London region, but for now we'll just leave it there. A few other things, so you could tighten down the security. There's things around firewalls for egress and ingress. Maybe you've got other components that you want to use, and you want them to talk to different bits of the cluster. In that case, that's all customizable. Specified the image to use for the base OS, so example here is using Ubuntu. And the other cool thing is that you have a max count, so you can actually specify on provision how many nodes and how many masters you want running. So in this case there's one master and there's going to be 2 nodes that are going to come up. And the other cool thing is you can specify a name, and I'm quite picky with my naming conventions, and for me I like to customize every bit possible so that they all match up in some way. So in the AWS world of things, you've got VPCs and things like that. I like to make sure that I have tagged them correctly with VPC, with the convention of K8s at the beginning, etc., just so they know they're linked up in some sort of way. And it's the same with with my DigitalOcean account. I like to make sure that all my things are tagged up properly. So in this case I could put K8 in front of that just to know that that's a Kubernetes cluster, but in this case I'll just leave it. So with that in place, then we can now actually go and apply this file. So what we'll do is if I go back and type Kubicorn apply soundwave-v4. Now what -v does is it's verbose, so it gives me whatever I specify will give me the amount of information back. I have it at 4 because I like to know exactly what's happening at a provisioning level, so I know if an error occurs I can go back and do some diagnostics to check and see why. And I always find that verbose methods are really good to have. Ooh, so we have an error. So it says reset timeout counter, runtime error, invalid memory address, or nil pointer. I'm just going to run that once more, see if that does it again. Okay, so this time it looks like it's decided to do it, so it skipped that issue, and it's actually going to create some droplets, which in the DigitalOcean world, a droplet is a server. It's like the equivalent to an AWS instance. Cool, so we'll let that build and then we'll see what happens. Awesome, so my Kubernetes cluster is now built according to the logs. So just a bit of a recap what happened is we went and created the cluster, and what Kubicorn did was talk to the DigitalOcean API and tell it that it needs some droplets. So it basically took the state store and said to DigitalOcean, right, I need all this stuff doing. So you can see that it created a droplet. It then started going onto the droplets to actually start provisioning and using the bootstrap file to go and provision Kubernetes onto those droplets. So it did some firewall stuff, and then it says, okay, wait for Kubernetes to come up. The green part shows that it wrote some kubeconfig to my Kubernetes config file, so that means I should be able to actually talk to the cluster from my machine. So if I say kubectl get nodes, what that should do now is actually talk to Kubernetes and actually give me back my nodes, which is correct, it has, which is nice. I can actually see I've got one master and I have 2 nodes running, well, they're all running at v1.8.4, which out of the box is great. And as you can see here, I can easily SSH into my droplet. So I'm assuming that's the master's droplet. Yes, that's correct. So I now have the power to actually go and do stuff if I want to. So if I want to look at pods, I can look at pods and I can see what's running, and I can see that Calico is running in etcd, the API servers, proxy, etc. And with this in place now, I now actually have a cluster running that can actually serve things. So I can actually go away and actually build a Minecraft server, or I could go away and host some of my websites or host some of my application APIs onto it. And just like that, I've actually been able to get a cluster up and running within, if I did the apply bit, it started at 21 past 10, and by literally 3-4 minutes, well, yeah, 3-4 minutes, I had a cluster up and running just like that in DigitalOcean, which is nice. Yeah, I could go away now and actually amend on top of this bootstrap stuff that Kubicorn gives you, and actually go and apply some things that I want to apply, maybe some of my customized Kubernetes components. But yeah, so with that in place then, as a quick example, just to show you how easy it is to destroy your cluster, you specify Kubicorn delete and then you just say the name of the cluster. So in this case it would be Soundwave. And again, what that would do is it will read the state file of the cluster, and it will go and talk to Kubernetes, DigitalOcean, and actually go and delete those droplets and delete the resources it created on DigitalOcean, which should give you in some way a clean slate to go away and actually go and build something else. So if you wanted to build another cluster, you could. If you wanted to go build the same cluster again, you could. So yeah. Awesome. So that should have given you a bit of a high-level overview of how Kubicorn works, what the experience is like to deploy a cluster, and how easy it actually is to deploy a cluster, just like that, which is nice. As a reminder, they do state that it's not production ready, so you must use it at your own risk. But hopefully this video has given you some motivation, a bit of passion to actually go away and actually, if you're someone that hasn't learned Kubernetes and you want to see what it's like to spin up a Kubernetes cluster, then hopefully this video has given you that to actually go away and actually go and play with it. So yeah, as always guys, thanks for watching. Peace.